Greetings, fellow PCGen enthusiasts. This is Andrew Monkey with PCGen, doing a class lesson on how to make your own homebrew custom classes. Today I decided to get a little inspiration from one of our list groups. Someone was asking how to make a knight, although unfortunately they were asking for, I believe, the closed content version, so we can't really explain how to do that one. So I cheated today, went and found something that was similar enough to work, and also combined spellcasting, which seems to get people hung up on. So this is a homebrew class, as far as I'm aware of, released under the OGL, so it should be perfectly fine for me just to reference it today for our little demonstration. And since this is my second attempt to do this little recording here due to a misspoken sentence, I'm coming back through here, and we're just going to kind of use what's already here. So I've already taken most of this stuff over here and put it into PCGen tag format here. So our first example here is the rogue. This is all commented out, and the comment is basically any hashtag preceding the line will comment it out. So I uncommented it so you could see the old school rogue, not quite up to standards for our normal 3.5 and Pathfinder, due to a bunch of changes I've gone through and done, and a revamping of how we understand the rules today. So this rogue is actually based off of the 3.5 because it's got the old classes tag and the old skills in here. This is not really a Pathfinder, but it's, like I said, a sample, and it works well enough for what it's supposed to do. So I took the Mage Knight here, and we start with the class tag, and then we have the name of the class, which is the Mage Knight. Now, PCGen will allow you to do a key name. You could simply call this Mage Knight. However, if you do that, the rest of these now have to become the Mage Knight. Anything that references the class using a pre-class has to use Mage Knight. And if there's any feats that used to go the Mage Knight, then you need to use the serves as tag class to get around that. So my general recommendation is to not use the key name unless it's absolutely imperative and you're trying to avoid duplication. You can also change the name that's displayed with the output name, and whatever you want to put here. However, it does require the option to use the output name to display that. This is a 8 hit die class, so every level gets 8 hit die. It is a base progression, or a base class. It has a 20 level progression, and it's meant for PC, so we went ahead and put the PC tag. Abbreviation, you can leave it off if you want. I went with the Mage Knight, TMK. Made sense to me. Although you can name it whatever you want, so it doesn't conflict. It's a 20 level progression. If this Pathfinder, that's top level usually. If there's epic progression, you can just actually mod this later and remove the max level. Source page, since this is coming off a website, I went with Homebrew or Custom, since it doesn't have a page number, but you can also do a page number if you so desire. The progression for the base attack bonus is a standard cleric. You get a top of 15, and I actually just show that on the chart here, so you can actually have a little more visual. Got the 0 through 15 here, maxes out at 3 attacks, iterative attacks there. So to do that in PCGen, we go with CL, which stands for class level, and only applies to the class level it is found within, which is the Mage Knight. It won't reference the rogue outside of itself, which is why CL does not work in feats or abilities. The only other exception to this rule is in spells tags, where it actually references the granting caster class level there. That's the only exception. So CL for class level times 3 divided by 4 will give us the progression of 0 through 15. we add the type base with a dot replace, and that replace means everything with the same type gets added together and is tallied. So if I were to leave this off, no problem, but if I were to put type base, whichever higher the two values would actually be accepted. So make sure you're consistent throughout your sources when you're doing this. This class has a good reflex and will save. So the 2 to 12 for a 20 level progression, and it's got a poor fortitude save, 0 to 6. So in PCGen, that translates simply to a class level divided by 2 plus 2. And then for the poor save, simply class level divided by 3. And if you're in Pathfinder, this is something we kind of tack on in here just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves, because there's many abilities that are triggered by your level, but you don't want to actually have to increase the level. So we tack on the Mage Knight level for referencing things, and we use class level there. So the Mage Knight level has the same value as class level. Now, if this was a prestige class or there was restrictions on who could take it, the next line is typically our pre-X line, basically pre-alignment, pre-race, pre-class, pre-skill, whatever restrictions the author decided to place on the class. This class has no restrictions, so we can go ahead and just skip that and go with start skill points, and this class starts with 4. For Pathfinder, it's just going to give you the straight 4 every level, regardless of when you get it. If this was 3rd edition or 3.5, it automatically takes that first value and will times it by 4 for the first level of the character. So if you take the Mage Knight level 1, it'll be 4 times 4, and then your intelligence value times 4 as well. And then if you take another level, like say Rogue level 1, you'd only get 8, because it's smart enough to realize that Rogue is now a second class level, not a first class level. And then we define the class skills with a C skill tag, and then we go through here and define each skill that is going to count as a class skill. This is a, like I said, a 3.5 Homebrew, so it's using those class skills. Craft, since we don't want to have to name each craft skill, and some books add more, we just went with type craft. Now all craft skills, or any skill with the type craft assigned to it, is now a class skill. Same with knowledge and profession. And the Mage Knight is a arcane spellcaster, so it gets the spell type of arcane. It uses the intelligence to determine its spells, and the class is defined as memorizing spells as a wizard using a spell book. It doesn't have its own spell list per se, it actually uses the wizard spell list. So we went with spell list, one selection, wizard. On top of that, the Mage Knight also gains a few cleric spells, mainly the cure wounds and list, resurrect, up to 5th level. So we tack that on. I think the Mage Knight should work. I have to actually double check that because I don't mess with that too often. Now for abilities. I put on here the 2 different ways we can do this. This is the old school, or if I'm in a hurry version. We have moved away from this and are actually in the process of converting these over to ability tags. But when it's your homebrew, you can do whatever you want, and more power to you. There is no automatic conversion set up for these, so if this actually were to get deprecated, we'd have to do this all by hand. So my recommendation, use the newer ability tag that we have, as it makes things a lot easier, a little more versatile, and you have a little bit more leeway. SAB will just simply display the name here. It does take variable substitutions that you can add on. It does take pre-X tag, so it's still very handy if you need it for shortcuts. Like I said, we're moving to the ability tag. So this would just show size up, canny defense, and summon familiar. I took liberty of just putting the same thing down here. And you'll notice that we have the size up and we have the canny defense. But since we add a few more things to it, we actually use a unique identifier using the tilde and then the class name afterwards. Because when you have just size up in the category of special ability and display it in the special quality section, no big deal. You can have as many characters as you want. Reference size up, you have to have the book source anyways to know what it would do. But with the advent of Pathfinder being very open-ended, and with the RSRD being open-ended, we add the extra fluff text. For our main publisher sources, we want you to support the publishers because we want them to continue to make quality products so we can make books for those products. So we want you to have the book in order to understand what the fluff. But we do include the mechanics so your character will be correct in most cases, unless there's a bug or we miss something. So in an official release, you'll probably have just a variable substitution, gives a plus, and then there you go. That's all you get. And if you don't know what the size up and the plus is doing, then you're not going to get too far, and you're going to end up having to go get the book anyways. But for homebrew sources, we go down here, get your unique description, and a lot of these declare the actual name of the class. So it would be a burden to have a bunch of size ups with a bunch of different names, and it get a little confusing, especially if you're not using the Mage Knight. So that's why we go with the ability name here and then the unique key identifier. And in order to get that nice little exec afterwards, tagged on the extraordinary. So that is how you do a ability here. An ability is pretty much a spruced up feat, if you will. We go by the master category that the ability will be found in, and we reference the abilities with the master category. It's then automatically granted because it's granted by the class, so it bypasses any restrictions that might have been on it. And then we just put the abilities in there. Now, I'll remove the extra one there. This is a spellcasting class. It only has cast. If I go over here, spells per day translates to cast. Your first column is your 0th level. If there's 0 or they didn't do it here, then you would put a 0 right there. But since they do get a 0th level, we put the progression in, comma delineated here. So it gets 4 0th level and 2 1st level, and then we continue. If I omit the 3rd level, you're casting at 1, casting at 2, you completely lose all your casting at level 3. When you make it to 4, well, your casting's back. So each line has to have a cast tag, and preferably in the progression order. In order to add spells to these custom homebrew classes, you can use the spells .mod, spell name, put the .mod, and then the class it references. And that, in theory, should add that to the Mage Knight. And that kind of covers most of that. Proficiencies, since we're here, we're proficient with all of those, so we can copy that over and we'll just place it right here. So look at that, old school, just do the auto weapon proficiency tag right there, and then type simple, and then your one-handed martial, and then all those and all that. Our newer standard is actually to do this. And get the name. Take that. And then unique identifier, because all classes will have that heading. that. And then you would make a ability with this, and then add all the weapons and then the shields and armor if applicable. And that is the basis and basics of making a spell casting and basic class all wrapped into one here using the newer ability files. And mind you, abilities have to be placed in an ability file. This is a class, and the class stuff goes in the class file. And we don't want to leave anything stranded out here. So that is how we do that. You can leave the SAB and the ability together, but you'll just have duplicates. So I just would prefer to get rid of the SAB. And that's how you handle class making. Thank you for tuning in, and hope you tune in for our next one. Thank you very much.